Maggie Dawson never expected her life to unravel in silence, but that's exactly how it happened, in the middle of a Tuesday, when the only sound in her small Denver home was the soft hum of a refrigerator and the rustle of wind brushing against an old windowpane. One moment, she was reaching for a box of cereal from the top shelf of her pantry. The next, her legs gave out beneath her like the floor had opened up. She collapsed hard onto the linoleum, her elbow cracking against the corner of a cabinet as she fell. Pain shot through her body like lightning, and for a split second, she thought she might be dying. But death would have been noisier. More dramatic. This was quiet, like a secret nobody was listening to. She lay there on the cold floor, unable to move, her breath shallow, her eyes blinking away tears that no one was around to notice. Time passed like molasses. Minutes turned to hours. She didn't have the strength to pull herself up, and her phone had slid across the kitchen like a cruel joke, resting just out of reach. As twilight crept through the blinds, Maggie realized no one was coming. Not her daughter, Rachel, who hadn't called in over a year. Not a friend, because most of them had either moved to Florida or into assisted living. Just silence, and a memory of a time when she was stronger, younger, when her body wasn't her enemy. Her rescue finally came in the form of a welfare check by a concerned Meals on Wheels volunteer. The EMTs helped her up, asked her questions she didn't want to answer, and brought her to the hospital where she lay now, staring blankly at the television in her recovery room, and Ford dripping into her arm like a slow metronome counting down the beats of a song she no longer wanted to sing. That's when it happened. That's when everything started to change. The local news switched to a story already in progress. Elon Musk, standing in front of a nondescript lab in Texas, flanked by a team of somber-looking scientists, speaking to a crowd of reporters. His voice was calm, curious, clipped with certainty. "We've developed something, potentially revolutionary," he said. "A single ingredient that rebuilds muscle tissue in aging humans. No exercise required. If this works, we're talking about the beginning of the end of muscular degeneration as we know it." The screen shifted to lab footage of elderly mice scurrying on tiny treadmills, their legs surprisingly strong, then to a slide that read, "Human trials begin this month." Maggie sat up straighter. She hadn't sat up straight in months. Her muscles ached, yes, but they felt suddenly hopeful. It was a stupid thing to feel. She'd been a science teacher for 37 years. She'd taught evolution, anatomy, and the ethics of biotechnology to rooms full of squirming teenagers who mostly just wanted to graduate. She knew better than to buy into buzzwords and billionaire promises. But she also knew pain. And she knew desperation. And when you're alone in a hospital bed with nothing but regret and reruns, even the smallest spark of possibility feels like wildfire. She watched the segment again on her phone, replaying it 3 times, listening carefully to each word, each claim. Myosin, they called it. A synthetic peptide compound derived from microbial DNA found in a Martian soil sample, at least that's what the press release implied. It sounded crazy. It sounded impossible. It sounded like science fiction. But then again, so did electric cars, reusable rockets, and brain-computer interfaces 10 years ago. The news anchor smiled as she wrapped up the segment. "One ingredient, endless possibilities," she said. "Would you take it?" Maggie stared at the screen and whispered, in a heartbeat. That night, she couldn't sleep. Not from the pain, not from the stiffness in her joints, not even from the low moan of the hospital's nighttime hum, but from the racing thoughts that wouldn't let her go. What if it was real? What if she could walk again without needing support? What if she could plant tomatoes in her garden, chase a dog through the yard, hike a trail, or simply stand up from a chair without planning her entire body around the effort? What if this story wasn't just another false hope? The next morning, she found an old email account still linked to her iPad and typed out a message, not really believing it would go anywhere. Subject: Old teacher needs a miracle. She wrote briefly about her life: retired, widowed, diagnosed with sarcopenia, recovering from a fall, and ended the message with a single sentence. If there's even a chance this thing you're making could help someone like me, I want to be part of it before it's too late. She hit send and closed the app, expecting nothing. The days dragged on. Physical therapy began. Maggie hated it. Hated the condescension, the reminders of what she used to be able to do without a second thought. The therapists were kind but distant, like they'd seen 1,000 Maggies before and would see 1,000 more. She didn't blame them. She felt forgettable too. Then, 3 days later, something impossible happened. Her phone rang. A blocked number. She almost didn't answer. "Is this Margaret Dawson?" a polite voice asked. "Yes," she said cautiously. "Please hold for Mr. Musk's assistant." There was a click, a pause, and then a woman's voice came on the line. Efficient, professional, excited. "Ms. Dawson, Mr. Musk read your email. He'd like to invite you to our facility in Texas for further conversation about your potential involvement in the Myosin trial. All travel expenses covered. We believe you'd be an ideal candidate. Can you be available this week?" Maggie's heart stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't dreaming. This was real. "Yes," she said, unsure of how the word left her mouth. "Yes, I can." And just like that, the world shifted. Not dramatically. Not with fireworks or trumpet blasts. Just a quiet invitation that felt like a hand reaching out in the dark. She packed her bags. She said goodbye to the nurses, who smiled politely and asked, "Are you sure this is safe?" And she nodded, because safety had never been her currency. She boarded a flight to Texas alone, a bundle of nerves and hope and disbelief. She stared out the window, watching the land slide beneath her like chapters of a story she hadn't read yet. When she landed, a black car with tinted windows picked her up. No small talk. Just a drive through winding desert roads that ended at a sleek facility built like a space-age bunker. Starbase Biotech, the sign read. She stepped out, squinting at the sun, and there he was, Elon Musk himself, waiting by the entrance, looking every bit like the man on TV, enigmatic, tired, brilliant. He extended a hand. "Maggie, right? Heard you taught science for almost 4 decades. That makes you overqualified for what we're trying to do." She laughed before she even realized she had. "You really read my email?" He smiled, eyes twinkling. Every word. And in that moment, as the wind picked up around them and the desert air buzzed with possibility, Maggie realized her life wasn't over. It was just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Maggie Dawson never thought her life would feel like someone else's science experiment, yet here she was, sitting in a sleek white room at Starbase Biotech with electrodes on her arms and a small needle poised above her skin, about to receive the first dose of something that could either restore her life or end it faster than nature intended. But long before she ever became a test subject in a billionaire's lab, Maggie was something else entirely, someone full of life, purpose, and drive, someone who once inspired generations of students to chase science like it was magic. The memory of her classroom came flooding back so vividly she could almost smell the alcohol markers and aging textbooks, could almost hear the sound of lockers slamming in the hall just before the bell rang. Room 112 at Denver High had been her temple, her universe. She'd taught biology with a passion that made mitochondria sound poetic and DNA sequencing feel like storytelling. Her students called her Mrs. D, and sometimes Mad Maggie, when she wore her periodic table apron on lab days and made them recite cell organelles like lyrics. She'd loved that job more than anything, well, almost anything. Her husband, David, came first. He was a jazz musician, tall and lanky with eyes that smiled before his mouth did. They met at a live music bar in 1981. He was playing saxophone, she was grading papers. He leaned over between sets and said, "You look like someone who makes the future smarter." She married him 2 years later, and their daughter Rachel was born in '86. Maggie balanced being a teacher, a mother, and a wife with surgical precision. She taught during the day, cooked dinner at night, and helped Rachel memorize multiplication tables while listening to David play Coltrane in the background. But life, as always, had its own schedule. David got sick in his 50s, ALS. Maggie watched the strongest man she knew lose control of his body in slow, unforgiving motion. She did everything she could, read every paper, emailed specialists, flew him to clinics in 3 states. But ALS didn't care about love or effort. It just took. And when it finished, it left Maggie hollow, clutching a folded flag and a grief so big it warped time. Rachel took it hard. Too hard. She was 20 when David died, and the loss carved a canyon between them that only deepened with every attempt Maggie made to talk about it. Rachel went to college, then grad school, then vanished into a busy adult life full of missed calls and postponed visits. "I'm just swamped, Mom," became the new hello. Maggie tried not to take it personally, but she did. She always did. And as the years passed and her own health began to fail, first arthritis in her knees, then sarcopenia creeping in like rust, she felt the familiar fear of losing control again. The same way she'd watched David's body betray him, she was watching her own do the same, and this time there was no one beside her to hold her hand while it happened. That's why myosin wasn't just a chance at mobility, it was a chance at redemption. Sitting in that lab in Texas, surrounded by white coats and blinking monitors, Maggie felt more alive than she had in a decade. Her mind, always sharp, always curious, was on fire with questions. She grilled the lead researcher, a woman named Dr. Leona Marsh, about the compound's peptide sequence, absorption half-life, and metabolic pathways. Dr. Marsh smiled and handed her a clipboard. "If this works the way we think it does, it won't just stop muscle decay. It will reverse it. Cellular regeneration at the mitochondrial level. Think of it as a reboot, not just a repair." Maggie stared at the syringe and then at her reflection in the lab's sterile window. Her hair was thinner, her eyes rimmed with fatigue, but her mind, that teacher's mind, was still hungry, still alive. She nodded once. "Let's begin." The needle went in with a sting. She barely flinched. 48 hours later, she noticed the first change. It was small, insignificant, really. She dropped her pen while filling out a symptom diary, and without thinking, she bent down to pick it up. No groan. No strain. Her knees held. That hadn't happened in years. She stood slowly, tested her legs, walked across the room, turned, walked back. Her gait felt smoother. Like old machinery suddenly finding oil. She didn't say anything at first. Scientists hate anecdotal data, and she didn't want to seem like a naive test subject chasing placebo highs. But inside, her heart was soaring. She hadn't felt this kind of quiet strength in years. It was like finding a light switch in a room you forgot had power. She tried a squat. Just one. Painful, yes. But doable. She stared at her legs, whispering, "You're still in there." The next few days were surreal. Each morning brought a new surprise. Her hands stopped shaking when she brushed her hair. She stopped relying on the guardrail to step into the shower. She felt hunger again, real, ravenous hunger like she hadn't known since menopause. It was working. Myosin was working. She documented everything. Measurements. Journals. Voice memos. She was still a teacher at heart, still a scientist. She sent emails to Dr. Marsh with observations and suggestions for tracking emotional impact, not just physical change. The staff began calling her Professor, out of respect. Even Musk dropped by her lab room on the 3rd day, carrying a strange gadget in one hand and a half-eaten protein bar in the other. "You're setting the curve, Maggie," he said, smiling. The compound's integrating with your biology faster than we've seen in any other subject. You're kind of a freak. She laughed. Flattery will get you better data. Seriously though, he said, pulling up a stool. This isn't just about your muscles. This is bigger than that. Aging, real biological aging, it's like software decay. We're not fixing a broken arm here. We're rewriting the operating system. And you, Maggie, are running version 2.0. She looked at him, searching his face for signs of ego or madness. There was both. But also a strange, boyish sincerity that reminded her of her brightest students, the ones who used to stay after class to talk about time travel and gene editing and artificial intelligence. She wondered if Musk had ever had a teacher like her, someone who saw his potential before the world did. Someone who believed in questions more than answers. That night, as she lay in her bunk at Starbase, staring at the ceiling and trying to process it all, Maggie recorded an audio log on her phone. Day 5. I bent down today without wincing. I peeled an orange without dropping it. I don't know what's happening to me, but for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm disappearing. I feel like I'm coming back. Like the person I used to be never left, she just went dormant. Maybe I'm not finished after all. Then she added, softly, Rachel, if you ever hear this. I'm still me. I hope that matters. She saved the file, closed her eyes, and fell asleep to the sound of her own voice, knowing that somewhere, somehow, a second chance was unfolding, not just for her body, but for everything she thought she'd lost. And the story was only just beginning. The silence in her room at Starbase was different from the silence in her hospital back in Denver. That was a silence of decay, of endings, of being forgotten. This was the silence of observation, of waiting, of being watched through two-way glass and data charts. Maggie Dawson had never felt so alive and so completely alone at the same time. Each morning she woke early, before the researchers came to scan her vitals or draw more blood. She'd sit on the edge of her bed and test her strength like it was a science experiment she could run before breakfast. One step forward, bend, rise, arms outstretched, hold for balance. Every time it felt just a bit easier, a little more fluid. She even did a short sequence of stretches once, like she used to teach her students before dissection labs to get the blood moving. The act made her smile, then cry, then laugh at the tears. Her body was remembering her. It was forgiving her for the years she'd neglected it. But the room, this pristine, white-walled, tech-laced room, had no warmth, no personality, no sound except the occasional intercom chime. She had a tablet, yes, and access to a feed of science journals and news outlets, but human contact came only during scheduled check-ins. The lab team was efficient but clinical, friendly but distant, the way you speak to someone who might be gone tomorrow. Maggie understood that. She had lived that. She was always the teacher students loved but never visited after graduation, the one who sent Christmas cards to former coworkers who never replied. She was someone who meant a lot to others only during a specific season of their lives. She thought of Rachel. Had she seen the news? Had she heard about the trial? Surely by now some clip had reached her phone. Maggie had once taught Rachel how to bake bread, how to change a tire, how to remember the difference between meiosis and mitosis. She'd kissed scraped knees and left notes in lunchboxes and once spent an entire summer building a cardboard solar system for a sixth-grade science fair Rachel didn't even want to enter. But all of that was years ago, buried beneath unspoken grief, unmet expectations, and long silences that stretched across time zones and unreturned voicemails. Maggie had tried to reconnect so many times, birthdays, Christmases, the anniversary of David's death, but Rachel had built walls that didn't crumble, not even when Maggie fell and landed in the hospital. Her daughter hadn't called then. Why would she now? Still, every time her tablet pinged with a notification, Maggie hoped. But it was always Elon's team, new data, new protocols, reminders to log her meals and any unusual dreams. She began to lie in her responses, not to mislead, but to fill the space with something more interesting. Dreamed I was 20 again, she wrote one morning. I ran through a field and didn't need to stop. Woke up crying. Don't know why. Dr. Marsh replied with a simple thank you and no follow-up. The dreams weren't unexpected. Myo-sin, it seemed, had side effects nobody wanted to admit yet. Increased emotional memory, vivid REM cycles, sometimes temporary auditory hallucinations. Maggie didn't mind. Her dreams were full of color, sound, and life. In them, she often saw David, healthy, smiling, playing his saxophone in their old living room. She knew it wasn't real, but the dreams felt like letters from a part of her life she missed more than she dared to admit. It was a Thursday when the loneliness reached its peak. She woke to a dull ache in her arms, not pain, just the unmistakable soreness of tissue regrowing. It made her giddy, but there was no one to share it with. Breakfast was delivered via a silent tray cart that slid through a retractable slot in the wall. The eggs were overcooked. The coffee was lukewarm. She stared at the tray and thought about the hundreds of mornings she'd spent cooking for her family, even after David was gone, even when Rachel refused to visit. She'd always cooked enough for two, out of habit. Now, not even one. The room seemed to shrink. She paced, then sat, then stood again. She began reciting amino acid structures aloud, just to hear a voice. She video recorded herself explaining photosynthesis and mitochondrial function. She imagined a classroom of invisible students. Her voice filled the room like oxygen. When she stopped, the silence returned twice as loud. That afternoon, she requested a call. Not to her daughter. Not yet. Just to anyone on the team. Human contact improves cognitive performance, she noted in the request. Even rats get toys. The reply came 5 hours later. Your concern is noted. You are scheduled for a peer participant session tomorrow. You'll be meeting the other 4 candidates in the trial. Maggie felt a jolt of hope so strong it made her laugh. She counted the hours like a child waiting for Christmas. The next morning, she was escorted through a long hallway and into a shared conference room with glass walls and circular seating. She saw them one by one as they entered, 4 other people who, like her, were trying to defy the slide toward nothingness. Hank was a tall, thin man in his 70s, wearing a navy cap and walking with a cane he didn't seem to need anymore. Lupe, late 50s, wore a bright scarf and had the kind of smile that looked like it had survived cancer. Daryl was in a motorized wheelchair, his legs thin but his arms still powerful, a former firefighter with burns on his neck and hands. Nana Jean was the oldest, 91 and sharp as a scalpel, dressed like a librarian, eyes gleaming like a child's on their first trip to the zoo. They introduced themselves quickly, awkwardly, and then something shifted. Maggie made a joke about how Elon Musk's cafeteria didn't understand seasoning, and everyone laughed. For the first time in days, the laughter wasn't canned or medical or polite, it was real. They shared stories. Pain. Triumph. Hank talked about Vietnam and how it still echoed in his sleep. Lupe had beat breast cancer twice and said Myo-sin was her 3rd chance at living. Daryl had lost his mobility in a rescue attempt gone wrong and had never regretted a single second of the fire. Nana Jean quoted Yeats and said she wanted to dance again before she died. Maggie listened, eyes wet, heart full. She told them about Rachel, about teaching, about David. They didn't pity her. They nodded. They understood. And in that sterile, lifeless room designed to measure human potential, Maggie finally felt human again. After the session, back in her room, she looked out the tiny window at the Texas sky, red and wide and full of storms she couldn't see but could feel in the air. She thought about tomorrow, and the next day, and the idea that maybe she wouldn't face them alone. Maybe these 4 strangers were about to become something more. Allies. Friends. Witnesses. A team. She opened her tablet and recorded a new voice memo. Day 11. I met the others. I didn't realize how lonely I'd been until I wasn't anymore. It's strange. You can survive on your own for so long that it starts to feel like normal. But then someone sees you, really sees you, and you remember what it feels like to be a person instead of a project. I think that's worth more than any medicine. She saved it and whispered into the quiet, wherever you are, Rachel. I hope someone's seeing you too. The day started like every other since Maggie arrived at Starbase Biotech, with cold air, sterile light, and a quiet hope tucked somewhere deep inside her bones. She'd grown accustomed to the schedule, the daily data collection, the software of machines tracking every twitch of her regenerated muscles. But today, that quiet hope cracked. It didn't explode. It didn't shatter. It cracked, hairline and sharp, the way a teacup can look perfect until you pour something inside and watch it leak. It began during the 7 a.m. physical calibration. Maggie felt strong, stronger than ever. Her push-ups had increased from 0 to 8. Her legs, once soft and tentative, now held her with a surprising firmness. When she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw the fading widow or the forgotten teacher, she saw muscle definition returning to her arms, clarity returning to her face. But strength is not always a blessing. And sometimes, your own body betrays you in ways you don't expect. During a simple resistance test, a muscle in Maggie's lower back spasmed violently. The pain shot through her like a wire whip, forcing a cry from her mouth before she could suppress it. She collapsed to the mat, breath caught in her throat, jaw clenched so tight she thought her teeth might crack. 2 technicians rushed over, a medic following close behind. When she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw the fading widow or the forgotten teacher, she saw muscle definition returning to her arms, clarity returning to her face. But strength is not always a blessing. And sometimes, your own body betrays you in ways you don't expect. During a simple resistance test, a muscle in Maggie's lower back spasmed violently. The pain shot through her like a wire whip, forcing a cry from her mouth before she could suppress it. She collapsed to the mat, breath caught in her throat, jaw clenched so tight she thought her teeth might crack. 2 technicians rushed over, a medic following close behind. Muscle overload, one of them said. We need to isolate the lumbar response pattern and administer a regenerative block. They spoke like she wasn't there. Like she was a machine that had malfunctioned. Maggie wanted to scream. Not from the pain, it was already fading, but from the fear. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't part of the story she was writing in her head. Myosin was supposed to be the miracle, the light, the solution. Instead, it was now a question mark. And it was a lonely one. After the episode, they confined her to bed rest. Just precautionary, Dr. Marsh had said. But Maggie knew better. She saw the way the staff avoided eye contact. She noticed how her data feed was removed from the group dashboard the other candidates monitored together. She wasn't part of the curve anymore. She was the deviation. The potential liability. We need to observe you independently for the next few days, Marsh added, voice calm, hands folded. This is about safety. We're not pulling you from the trial. But Maggie heard what wasn't said. Not yet. The room was quiet again, but it felt different now. Before, the silence was filled with longing. Now it was filled with dread. Maggie couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. She ran the memory over in her mind like a forensics report, analyzing every move, every sensation, looking for signs, warnings she'd missed. Had she pushed too hard? Had she ignored fatigue? Had she wanted it too badly? She thought about David. About the way his body had failed him, slowly, then all at once. She remembered the exact moment he couldn't lift his fork anymore. The way he'd smiled through it, trying to protect her from the truth. She wondered if she'd done the same thing today, smiling through fear, pretending to be invincible. The following morning, a message appeared on her tablet. From Hank. Short. Direct. We heard. Are you okay? Maggie stared at the message for a long time, not knowing how to answer. What did okay mean anymore? She typed, pain came out of nowhere. My back gave out. They're isolating me for observation. Don't know what it means yet. A few minutes passed. Then another message, this time from Lupe. You're not alone. We're still with you. Whatever happens. Maggie wanted to cry. She didn't. But she let the warmth of those words settle somewhere beneath her ribs. Later that day, Dr. Marsh returned with a chart and a new tone. She was less confident now, more clinical. The compound is accelerating mitochondrial repair, but in certain subjects, your group included, it's also overenergizing dormant muscle fibers. Basically, your body's running too hot. Like turning on a furnace after it's been cold for years. We're adjusting your dosage. You mean lowering it, Maggie said flatly. Marsh nodded. Only temporarily. And if the overdrive returns? Then we reevaluate. Maybe we freeze your progress. Maybe we look into maintenance protocols. So I get strong enough to remember what power feels like, and then you lock me in that memory. Marsh hesitated. We're still early. The science is evolving in real time. Maggie looked away. The betrayal wasn't in the needle or the pain, it was in the idea that this miracle might have a ceiling. That her rebirth had a deadline. That she might never finish the climb. The rest of the day crawled. She tried to distract herself with articles, videos, even her own science notes from years past. Nothing helped. Her back still throbbed. Not physically, it had been numbed. But the memory of pain is often louder than pain itself. It echoes in your muscles. It hums in your breath. That night, she recorded a new log. Day 12. I'm scared again. Not just because I hurt. But because for the first time since I got here, I'm starting to believe that maybe I asked for too much. That maybe aging is supposed to be irreversible. That maybe science can't fix a soul that's been tired this long. But I don't want to believe that. I won't. Because the second I felt strong again, even for a moment, I remembered what it meant to feel alive. And I'm not giving that up. Not yet. She hit save and lay back down. Staring at the ceiling, she whispered David's name. Not in sorrow. In resolve. She knew the risk now. Knew that Myosin might not be perfect, that her body might not play by anyone's rules, not even her own. But Maggie had always been a fighter. A builder. A teacher. And even if this story ended in failure, she would write every line of it herself. With truth. With grit. And with a spine that, despite everything, refused to break. After days of isolation and quiet uncertainty, Maggie felt a shift inside herself as subtle as a candle flickering in a dark room. The back pain had lessened, replaced by a dull ache that reminded her she was still human, still healing, still fighting. Her dosage was adjusted as promised, reduced to prevent overload but enough to keep her muscles waking from the long sleep. At first, the change felt like a retreat, a step backward in a climb she hadn't even begun to master. But then something unexpected happened. The next morning, when the physical therapy technician rolled in the lightweight resistance bands, Maggie found herself reaching for them with a determination she hadn't felt in months. The muscles in her arms contracted, pulling against the bands with a strength she thought she'd lost forever. She held the stretch longer than yesterday, then longer still. Her body responded not just with power but with an almost childlike curiosity, as if rediscovering what it meant to move freely after years of hesitation. During the group session later that day, the other participants noticed her new energy. Hank smiled knowingly, his weathered hands clapping lightly. Lupe's eyes sparkled, and Darryl gave an approving nod from his wheelchair. Nana Jean, ever the poet, quoted a line from Rumi, "Don't grieve. Anything you lose comes round in another form. Maggie felt a warmth spread through her chest. She wasn't alone. This trial wasn't just a collection of scientific data points. It was a gathering of survivors, of fighters, of people clawing back their lives. Her conversations with the group deepened. She learned that Hank had a granddaughter who was about to graduate college, that Lupe baked the best pecan pie in Texas, that Daryl was learning to paint with his non-dominant hand, and that Nana Jean had once performed on Broadway. These stories filled the sterile halls with color and laughter. More than once, Maggie caught herself smiling without realizing it. But hope is fragile, and Maggie knew better than to let it become an excuse for complacency. The improvements came with their own challenges. The lower back spasms returned sporadically, and new aches surfaced in muscles she hadn't worked in years. The science team remained cautious, reminding her constantly to listen to her body and report any anomalies. Still, she pushed forward, motivated by a new goal, one she hadn't dared to admit until that moment. She wanted to walk outside, unassisted, and feel the wind on her face without fear or pain. One afternoon, as Maggie practiced walking laps around the lab's indoor track, she caught her reflection in the polished glass walls. She saw not just the physical changes but the emotional transformation as well. Her eyes, once clouded with sorrow, now held a spark of defiance. Her posture was more upright, more purposeful. This was no longer a woman defeated by age or loss but a warrior reclaiming territory. When she returned to her room that evening, she recorded her thoughts. Day 15. Today, I walked 15 laps. Not fast, not perfect, but I did it. It feels like I'm climbing out of a deep hole, one step at a time. I'm scared the pain will come back, scared the progress will stop or reverse. But today, hope flickered inside me. Maybe that's all I need to keep moving. The team began to notice the change too. Dr. Marsh smiled more often, her updates becoming less cautious and more optimistic. They introduced new protocols designed to maximize the effects of Myosin while minimizing side effects. Maggie was part of the experiments now, contributing feedback, adjusting her routines, becoming more than just a patient, she was a partner. Yet, even as hope grew, the shadow of doubt lingered. Maggie knew this was only the beginning. The real challenge would come when the trial ended and the world outside demanded more than controlled steps and lab conditions. Could she face the loneliness of real life again? Would Rachel recognize the woman she was becoming? Could science really rewrite the final chapters of her story? These questions hovered like ghosts, but Maggie refused to let them haunt her. Instead, she focused on the moments she could control, the warmth of a smile, the strength of a muscle, the quiet company of newfound friends. Each day was a battle, each step a victory. And somewhere in the mix of uncertainty and courage, Maggie found a reason to believe. Because sometimes, all it takes is a flicker of hope to light an entire life. Maggie lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, the sterile white above her now both familiar and suffocating. Her body was changing in ways she hadn't dared imagine just weeks ago, yet her mind was tangled in memories, some warm, some sharp like shards of glass. She thought about her childhood in Kansas, the endless wheat fields, the dusty roads where she and her brothers played until the sun dipped behind the horizon. She remembered her mother's laughter, a sound that could fill a room even on the darkest days, and her father's quiet strength, the way he never needed many words to show he cared. Those early years were simple but grounded, a foundation Maggie had relied on through all the storms that came later. Then came David. They met at the university where Maggie was teaching biology and he was finishing his master's in jazz performance. Their worlds seemed worlds apart, her filled with microscopes and lectures, his with saxophones and late-night gigs, but somehow they fit. He had a way of making silence sing, and she had a way of making complexity feel clear. Together, they built a life in Denver, filled with music, science, and the stubborn hope that love could outlast any hardship. The birth of Rachel brought joy and chaos. Maggie tried to balance her career with motherhood, often feeling like she was failing at both. She remembered late nights comforting a colicky baby and early mornings grading papers, her heart torn between two worlds. David's illness came slowly at first, a cough here, fatigue there, until one day the music stopped. Watching him fade broke Maggie in ways she never thought possible. She was a teacher, a healer, a fixer, but this time, there was no cure. The loss swallowed her whole. Rachel drifted away too, the pain between them growing like an unspoken wall. Maggie blamed herself for not being strong enough for either of them. For years, she lived in the shadow of grief, retreating into her work, into silence. The mirror showed a woman hardened by loss, but inside, Maggie still carried the little girl who once danced barefoot through those Kansas fields, the woman who loved fiercely, and the mother who longed for connection. Now, as her muscles grew stronger, so did the echoes of the past. Memories flooded her dreams, sometimes comforting, sometimes painful. The science team noted the vivid REM cycles but didn't know the full story behind them. Maggie wondered if her body was trying to heal more than just physical damage, if her soul was waking up too. One afternoon, during a group session, Nana Jean surprised everyone by bringing a photo album she'd found in her daughter's care package. The pages were yellowed but alive with pictures, black and white shots of childhood, wedding days, birthdays long past. She passed the album around, and each participant shared a story. When it came to Maggie, she hesitated. Then she spoke softly about David's last concert, the one he played from a hospital bed, how music had been his final gift to her. The group listened in silence, moved by the pain and love in her voice. That moment cracked something open for Maggie. She realized that healing wasn't just about muscles or mitochondria, it was about facing the past and forgiving herself. She sent a message to Rachel that night. Not to ask for forgiveness or demand answers, but to share a memory, one of them baking cookies on a rainy afternoon, laughing over flour-covered countertops. She didn't expect a reply, but she needed to try. In the quiet that followed, Maggie felt a strange peace. She was still broken, still scared, but also more whole than she'd been in years. The trial was no longer just about rebuilding her body. It was about reclaiming her story, rewriting the chapters she thought were lost. And as she drifted to sleep, she whispered into the dark, "I'm coming back, Rachel. One day at a time." Maggie woke early, the morning light slicing through the blinds and painting lines across the floor. Today was the day they called the milestone test, a critical marker designed to measure just how far Myosin had helped her regain strength and mobility. Months ago, the idea of even walking to the end of a hallway seemed impossible. Now, she faced a course that included stairs, balance challenges, and a timed walk. The medical team assembled around her with gentle but focused energy. Hank gave her a thumbs up. Lupe squeezed her hand. Even Dr. Marsh smiled, a rare softness in her usually precise demeanor. Maggie's heart pounded, not from fear exactly, but from the weight of what this test represented. It wasn't just about numbers on a chart. It was proof that age, loss, and time didn't have to define the rest of her life. The course began with walking laps around the indoor track. Maggie moved cautiously, muscles humming with unfamiliar but welcome strength. The steps were steady, deliberate. She focused on breathing, the rhythm steady as her feet met the floor. Next came the stairs, 6 steps up, 6 down. Her legs shook as she lifted herself one step at a time. Her breath came in shallow gasps, heart racing. "Keep going," Dr. Marsh encouraged. "You're doing great." At the top, Maggie paused, legs trembling but eyes sharp. She took a moment, then descended with care. Each movement was an act of defiance against the years that tried to steal her mobility. The balance challenge was next, a narrow beam barely wider than her foot. She stepped on, arms outstretched like a tightrope walker. Her body wobbled, the faintest tremor betraying her concentration. A bead of sweat trickled down her temple. She swallowed hard and pressed forward. The world narrowed to that beam and her will. One misstep, and everything could crumble. But she made it. The cheer from the observers felt like sunlight breaking through a storm. The final test was the timed walk, 200 meters as fast as she could manage. The clock started ticking, and Maggie pushed herself forward. Each step burned, muscles screaming in protest, but she focused on the finish line ahead. She thought of David, of Rachel, of every moment she'd lost and every moment she wanted back. When she crossed the line, gasping for breath, the room erupted in applause. Hank clapped so hard his hands reddened. Lupe laughed, tears in her eyes. Maggie smiled through exhaustion, a fierce joy swelling in her chest. "You crushed it," Marsh said, eyes bright. But the victory was bittersweet. Later that evening, Maggie felt a sharp pain in her left knee. It was unexpected, severe enough to make her limp. The trial team rushed to evaluate her. "Mild inflammation," Marsh explained. "Probably a result of overexertion. We'll adjust your therapy." Maggie nodded, biting back frustration. She had just climbed a mountain only to find a new obstacle at the summit. That night, alone in her room, she journaled her feelings. Day 20. Today I proved I can still fight. That my body can still respond, can still surprise me. But the pain in my knee reminds me that this is no easy path. The journey is full of setbacks. But also victories. I choose to hold on to both. To learn from them. To keep moving. Maggie's resolve deepened. She wasn't just rebuilding muscle, she was rebuilding hope, courage, and the fierce belief that life could still hold new beginnings. The road ahead was uncertain, but Maggie was ready for whatever came next. The days after the milestone test brought a mix of triumph and tension that Maggie hadn't anticipated. The pain in her knee had not fully subsided, a stubborn reminder that her body was still fragile despite the gains Myosin had brought. Physical therapy sessions became more challenging, requiring patience and adjustments that tested her resolve. One afternoon, Dr. Marsh called Maggie into her office for a private conversation. The room was quiet, filled with the low hum of machines from the hallway. Marsh's expression was serious but kind. "Maggie, we've been reviewing your progress and the recent flare-ups. While you've made incredible strides, we need to talk about the next phase." Maggie listened closely, heart pounding. Marsh continued, "The trial is moving toward a stage where we'll need to increase your activity levels significantly. This means more intense exercises and longer therapy sessions. There's also a higher risk of injury or setbacks." The words landed like a weight on Maggie's chest. She had come this far by pushing through pain and doubt. Now, the path ahead seemed steeper, more precarious. "What are my options?" Maggie asked quietly. Marsh hesitated, then said, "You can continue with the trial as planned, accepting the risks, or we can adjust your program to a maintenance level that prioritizes safety over rapid progress. It would mean slower gains but fewer complications." The choice felt monumental. To keep pushing could mean real transformation but also potential harm. To slow down could mean preserving her current gains but risking stagnation. Maggie thought of David and Rachel, of the promise she'd made to herself to reclaim her life. But she also thought of the fear that had crept in after the back spasm and now the knee pain. "I want to keep going," she said finally, voice firm despite the uncertainty inside. "I'm willing to take the risk." Marsh nodded, respect shining in her eyes. "We'll support you every step. But you need to listen to your body and communicate openly." Over the next week, Maggie's routine intensified. Early mornings became filled with resistance training and balance drills. Her muscles burned in new ways, fatigue settling deep in her bones. Yet, amidst the exhaustion, there was a growing sense of accomplishment, a feeling that she was breaking barriers she'd thought permanent. The support from the group remained a lifeline. Hank's encouragement, Lupe's laughter, Daryl's quiet strength, they reminded her she wasn't alone. One evening, as Maggie rested after a particularly grueling session, her tablet buzzed with a message from Rachel. It was brief but powerful. proud of you, Mom." The words pierced through months of silence, opening a crack in the wall between them. Maggie responded immediately, fingers trembling. "Thank you. I'm trying. Maybe we can talk soon." The connection, fragile as it was, ignited a hope Maggie hadn't felt in years. Yet the physical challenges loomed large. The next day, during a complex balance exercise, Maggie slipped. The fall was sudden, jolting, but she caught herself just in time. Her heart raced, adrenaline flooding through her. Dr. Marsh rushed over, checking for injury. "No damage, but you need to be more careful," she cautioned. The incident rattled Maggie more than she expected. Fear whispered that maybe she was overreaching, that her body wasn't ready for this pace. That night, she sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. The choice she'd made now felt heavier, fraught with risks she hadn't fully understood. But deep inside, the spark of determination burned brighter. Maggie whispered to herself, "This is my path. My fight. And I will walk it, no matter what." The following weeks crept in with an unsettling quiet, as if the calm before a storm. Maggie's body was stronger, but her mind wavered in the shadows of doubt that never fully disappeared. The knee pain persisted intermittently, like a warning signal she tried to ignore. During therapy sessions, she caught herself hesitating, a flicker of fear tightening her muscles just before movement. One morning, as she prepared for a routine session, she noticed her reflection in the mirror by the entrance. The woman looking back was both familiar and foreign, eyes bright with determination but marked by exhaustion and worry. Maggie shook off the unease and focused on the work ahead. Yet the creeping doubt was not just physical. Rachel's recent message had opened a door, but the silence that followed felt like a gulf between them too wide to bridge overnight. Maggie's heart ached with longing and guilt. Had she been absent too long? Could she rebuild the fragile threads of their relationship after so much time lost? The group became her anchor. Nana Jean's steady presence reminded Maggie that healing was not linear. Lupe shared stories of her own struggles with family estrangement and how she found peace only by letting go of expectations. Hank, with his gruff humor, reminded everyone that setbacks were part of the journey, not the end. Despite their support, Maggie felt isolated in her doubts. One afternoon, during a particularly grueling set of exercises, her knee gave a sharp, stabbing pain. She froze mid-movement, tears welling in her eyes from frustration and fear. Dar. Marsh rushed over immediately, her face tight with concern. "You need to rest, Maggie. This isn't just soreness." Maggie wanted to protest, to push forward, but the pain spoke louder than pride. The trial team agreed to pause the most intense parts of her therapy for a week to allow healing. Forced into rest, Maggie's mind spiraled. She questioned if the risks were worth it, if the dream of reclaiming her independence was slipping away. One evening, she sat in her hospital room scrolling through old photos on her tablet, images of Rachel as a toddler, David laughing with his saxophone, moments frozen in time. She whispered to herself, "What if this is as good as it gets? What if I'm fooling myself?" The silence was broken by a soft knock. Nana Jean appeared with a cup of tea and a worn book of poems. "Healing isn't just muscle and bone," she said gently. "It's the heart and mind too. Sometimes the shadows must pass before the light returns." Those words lingered with Maggie long after Nana Jean left. She began to journal more honestly than ever, capturing not just her physical progress but her fears, hopes, and regrets. Slowly, the shadows of doubt became part of her story, not enemies, but companions she could learn from. One morning, after days of rest, Maggie stood at the window watching the sunrise. The light painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, a reminder that every day was a new beginning. She promised herself to keep moving forward, embracing both the hope and the doubt as essential parts of the journey. Because healing, she realized, was never just about the body. It was about learning to live fully, with all the messy, beautiful contradictions of being human. Maggie woke to the soft hum of the hospital waking around her, the familiar buzz of machines blending with distant footsteps and quiet conversations. After days of rest and reflection, today felt different, charged with a new energy she hadn't felt in weeks. The shadows of doubt still lurked in the corners of her mind, but beneath them, a flicker of determination burned brighter. The trial team had adjusted her therapy schedule to balance caution with progress. This morning, she was to attempt a new exercise, something called neuromuscular re-education, designed to help retrain her muscles and nervous system to work together more effectively. Dr. Marsh explained it with her usual calm precision, but Maggie sensed an excitement behind the clinical words. This could be a turning point, she said. Maggie wasn't sure what to expect, but she trusted the team, and most of all, herself. As she settled into the exercise, a combination of gentle electrical stimulation and guided movements, she felt a surge of warmth and strength ripple through muscles that had long lain dormant. The sensation was strange but invigorating, like waking up from a deep sleep to a world full of possibilities. Over the next few sessions, Maggie noticed subtle changes. Movements felt smoother, coordination improved, and the nagging knee pain softened to a dull ache. But the true breakthrough came unexpectedly during a therapy session when the team introduced a simple weightlifting exercise. As Maggie grasped the dumbbell, she hesitated, a flicker of fear threatening to hold her back. Then, with a steady breath, she lifted the weight. Her arm trembled but held firm. She repeated the lift, then again, each time with more confidence. When the session ended, Dr. Marsh smiled and said, "You're ready for the next level." That evening, Maggie stood in front of the mirror, flexing her bicep and marveling at the strength returning to her body. It was more than physical, it was a reclaiming of self, a promise that the years behind her didn't have to dictate the years ahead. She reached for her journal and wrote, Day 35. Today I lifted a weight. It might seem small to some, but to me, it feels like climbing a mountain. I'm waking up, not just in muscle, but in spirit. The breakthrough rippled through the group too. Hank shared his own small victories, Lupe baked an extra batch of cookies to celebrate, and Nana Jean recited a poem about resilience. Even Rachel sent another message, "Keep fighting, Mom. You're amazing." The connection, fragile but growing, filled Maggie with a quiet joy. Yet, amid the celebration, Maggie knew the journey was far from over. The breakthrough was a step forward, but the road ahead promised new challenges, new tests of strength and spirit. She embraced the uncertainty, ready to face whatever came next with the same fierce hope that had carried her this far. The morning sun spilled golden light across the therapy room, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch into the future Maggie was beginning to believe in. After the breakthrough with neuromuscular re-education and weightlifting, she felt a cautious optimism growing inside her, a fragile yet persistent flame that warmed her from within. The team had adjusted her program to include outdoor activities, something that once seemed like a distant dream. Today's task, a walk in the nearby park, a real stretch beyond the hospital walls and sterile halls that had confined her for so long. As Maggie stepped outside, the fresh air filled her lungs with a sweetness she hadn't tasted in months. Birds chirped overhead, leaves rustled in the breeze, and the sunlight dappled the path ahead. The world felt alive, vibrant, and inviting, yet Maggie's body was still tentative. Each step was measured, muscles relearning how to support her weight, her balance slightly off but improving with every pace. Hank walked beside her, offering steady encouragement. "Look at you," he said with a grin. "You're like a kid discovering the world all over again." Maggie laughed softly, the sound light and freeing. "Feels like it," she admitted. "But also like I'm facing it for the first time." The park stretched before them, a canvas of green fields, towering trees, and winding trails that seemed to promise endless possibilities. Maggie thought of David and the life they had dreamed of building, the music and science that had filled their home. She thought of Rachel and the fragile hope she was nurturing for reconciliation. Each step forward was for them, but also for herself, a reclaiming of agency and identity that the years of illness and loss had threatened to steal. As they walked, Maggie noticed small details she'd missed before, the way the sunlight caught on a spider's web, the scent of blooming jasmine, the laughter of children playing nearby. The world was full of simple miracles waiting to be rediscovered. But the physical challenges remained real. After 20 minutes, Maggie felt her muscles tire, her knee complaining with a familiar ache. She paused, breathing deeply, reminding herself that progress wasn't about speed but persistence. "It's okay to rest," Hank said kindly. "You're doing great." They found a bench beneath an old oak tree, and Maggie sat, letting the warmth of the sun seep into her skin. In that quiet moment, she felt a profound sense of gratitude, for the chance to be outside, for the support around her, for the life she was rebuilding piece by piece. The next few days brought a flurry of new experiences. Maggie tried gardening in the hospital courtyard, her hands tentative but eager as they dug into soil and planted tiny seedlings. She joined group yoga sessions designed for seniors, where movement was slow and deliberate but powerful in its healing. Each activity pushed her boundaries, challenging her muscles, mind, and spirit. The trial team monitored her progress closely, adjusting plans to balance ambition with care. One afternoon, as Maggie rested after a therapy session, Dr. Marsh stopped by with a small box. Inside was a wearable device, lightweight and discreet, that tracked muscle activity and provided real-time feedback. "This will help us fine-tune your training," Marsh explained. "It's like having a coach with you all the time." Maggie strapped on the device, feeling a mix of curiosity and excitement. It was a small step but one that made her feel connected to a future where technology and human will join forces. The days turned into weeks, and Maggie's strength grew in tandem with her confidence. She found joy in small victories, walking longer distances without assistance, lifting heavier weights, balancing with less effort. The park became a favorite destination, a symbol of freedom and renewal. Yet, amid the progress, old fears lingered. Nightmares visited her sleep, shadows of past losses and doubts creeping in when she was most vulnerable. She confided in Nana Jean, whose wisdom offered comfort and perspective. "Healing is never a straight line," Jean said gently. "It's a dance between light and dark, strength and vulnerability." Those words anchored Maggie in the turbulence, reminding her that courage wasn't absence of fear but persistence despite it. One afternoon, Maggie received a call from Rachel. They spoke tentatively at first, exchanging updates, then slowly peeling back layers of pain and misunderstanding. Maggie shared stories of the trial, of her daily struggles and hopes. Rachel listened, her voice soft with emotion. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she said. "I want to be part of this journey." The call ended with plans to meet soon, a seed of reconciliation planted and nurtured by shared vulnerability and hope. As the sun set over the horizon, Maggie sat by her window, watching the sky blush with colors of promise. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but the path was clearer than it had been in years. She thought of the strength growing in her muscles and the courage swelling in her heart. The new horizon was not just a place but a state of being, a testament to resilience, love, and the endless capacity for renewal. Maggie whispered to the fading light, "This is just the beginning." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As Maggie settled deeper into the rhythm of her recovery, she began to understand that the toughest battles were not always visible to the eye. The muscle rebuilt, the steps regained, but beneath the surface, there was a war being waged in her mind and spirit. Every morning she faced not only physical pain but also the weight of memories, regrets, and the lingering sting of loneliness. The Myosin treatment was transforming her body, but healing the heart was another challenge entirely. The hospital's corridors, once a maze of sterile white walls and antiseptic smells, now felt like a second home. Maggie had grown close to the staff and fellow patients, their stories weaving into the fabric of her own. But there were moments when she felt isolated in her struggle. The loss of her old life, the music-filled house, the laughter of family gatherings, the simple freedom of movement, sometimes felt like a chasm she might never cross again. During therapy sessions, she often found her mind drifting to those times. She remembered David's saxophone melodies filling the living room, Rachel's soft voice reading stories before bed. Those memories were bittersweet, fueling her determination but also stirring sorrow. One afternoon, as she prepared for a session, a new therapist named Emily joined the team. Emily was young and energetic, with a gentle empathy that Maggie found comforting. Over the next weeks, Emily helped Maggie explore not just physical exercises but also breathing techniques and mindfulness practices aimed at managing pain and anxiety. Healing is holistic, Emily explained. The body and mind are deeply connected. We need to care for both. The sessions with Emily opened new doors for Maggie. She learned to recognize the tension in her shoulders, the tightness in her chest, and how to release them with breath and intention. The practice wasn't easy. Some days, emotions bubbled up unexpectedly. Tears in the middle of a quiet moment, frustration during progress plateaus, grief for what had been lost. But gradually, Maggie found strength in vulnerability, courage in facing the unseen battles within. Outside the therapy room, relationships continued to evolve. Rachel visited for the first time in years, their meeting awkward but filled with tentative hope. They talked about the past, about misunderstandings, and shared their fears and dreams. Maggie felt the fragile threads of connection slowly weaving back together, a tapestry not yet whole but growing stronger. Meanwhile, Hank and Lupe remained steadfast companions, their friendship a constant source of laughter and support. One afternoon, Hank surprised Maggie with a visit from his grandson, a lively boy named Carter. Watching Carter's boundless energy and unfiltered joy reminded Maggie of the life she was fighting to reclaim, not just for herself, but for the people she loved. But even as progress continued, setbacks surfaced. One evening, after a long day of therapy, Maggie felt an overwhelming fatigue. Her muscles ached deeply, and the familiar knee pain flared again. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of falling, of losing balance both physically and emotionally. The next day, she confided in Emily about her fears, that maybe the progress was an illusion, that her body would betray her again. Emily listened patiently and offered a simple truth: healing isn't a straight line. It's a series of steps forward and back. What matters is that you keep moving, even when the path is unclear. Those words resonated with Maggie. She realized that strength was not just in muscle, but in the willingness to keep trying despite uncertainty. Around this time, a new discovery added both hope and complexity to Maggie's journey. Researchers analyzing the Myosin trials found that the supplement's effects varied based on genetic factors, meaning some patients experienced faster results while others progressed more slowly. Maggie learned that her genetics placed her in the slower response group, which explains some of the challenges and setbacks she faced. The revelation was humbling but also empowering. It meant her journey was unique, shaped by her body's own rhythms and needs. The trial team adjusted her program accordingly, emphasizing steady, sustainable progress over rapid gains. Maggie embraced the new approach with renewed patience. One crisp autumn afternoon, Maggie and Rachel took a slow walk through the hospital's garden. The air was cool and fragrant with fallen leaves. They spoke quietly about the future, plans to rebuild their relationship, hopes for family gatherings, dreams that once seemed impossible. Rachel squeezed Maggie's hand and said, "I want to be there for you, Mom. No matter what." The moment felt like a turning point, a bridge spanning years of silence and pain. That night, Maggie lay awake reflecting on the unseen battles, the internal struggles that had shaped her recovery as much as the physical therapy. She realized that healing was more than muscles or movement. It was about reclaiming identity, forgiving the past, and embracing the unknown future with courage. The road ahead was still long, filled with twists and turns, but Maggie no longer feared the shadows. Instead, she welcomed them as part of the journey, knowing that each step forward, visible or not, was a victory. As the months rolled forward, Maggie began to sense a shift beneath the surface of her recovery. A subtle but unmistakable turning of the tides that had once seemed so relentlessly against her. The slow, steady rebuilding of her body was now matched by a growing clarity in her mind and spirit. The struggles that had once consumed her days no longer felt like insurmountable barriers but rather challenges to be met with resilience and grace. The Myosin trial had transformed from a clinical experiment into a journey of profound personal growth. One morning, as Maggie stepped into the therapy room, she noticed a new energy among the team. Dr. Marsh greeted her with a broad smile, holding a small envelope. "Good news," Marsh said. "Your latest muscle strength tests show a significant improvement, better than we expected at this stage." Maggie's heart lifted at the words. The results confirmed what she had begun to feel in her body, strength returning not just in fleeting moments but as a consistent foundation. Buoyed by this progress, the team introduced new exercises aimed at further enhancing balance, flexibility, and endurance. Maggie tackled them with determination, fueled by the knowledge that each small victory brought her closer to the life she longed for. Outside the clinic, the changing seasons mirrored Maggie's own transformation. The summer heat gave way to crisp autumn air, the trees shifting from lush greens to fiery reds and golds. The park walks, once tentative and slow, grew longer and more confident. She and Hank often met there, their conversations ranging from light-hearted jokes to reflections on the deeper meanings of their journeys. Hank's grandson Carter had become a regular visitor too, his youthful exuberance a constant reminder of life's enduring joys. Yet, amidst the growing light, Maggie was mindful of the fragility that still lingered. One afternoon, as she practiced a challenging balance exercise, a sudden dizziness swept over her, forcing her to steady herself against the wall. Dr. Marsh rushed to her side, concern etched on her face. "You're pushing too hard," Marsh cautioned. "Remember, progress doesn't mean ignoring your body's signals." The incident served as a sobering reminder that healing was a careful dance between ambition and caution. Maggie nodded, grateful for the reminder and more determined than ever to listen to the whispers of her body. The emotional landscape of Maggie's journey continued to evolve as well. Her relationship with Rachel deepened, with more frequent visits and heartfelt conversations that healed old wounds. One evening, after sharing a home-cooked meal, Rachel surprised Maggie with a gift, a scrapbook filled with photos, letters, and mementos from their family's past. Tears welled in Maggie's eyes as she flipped through the pages, a tangible reminder of the love that endured despite years of separation. The gift became a symbol of renewed connection, a foundation on which they could rebuild their relationship. Meanwhile, Nana Jean's wisdom remained a guiding light. During one of their long talks, Jean said, "Strength isn't just about muscle. It's about the heart's capacity to forgive, to hope, and to keep moving forward even when the path is unclear." Maggie carried those words with her, especially on difficult days when doubt crept in. The turning tides were not just physical but emotional and spiritual, weaving together to create a new sense of wholeness. One significant milestone arrived unexpectedly during a routine checkup. The trial team informed Maggie that she was eligible to begin a community outreach program designed to share the benefits of Myosin with other seniors struggling with muscle loss. The idea of helping others who faced similar challenges filled Maggie with pride and purpose. She eagerly volunteered, becoming a voice of hope and encouragement in local senior centers and support groups. Speaking to others about her journey reinforced her own commitment and underscored the transformative power of resilience and innovation. The community's response was heartening. Seniors who had resigned themselves to frailty and isolation began to see a glimmer of possibility. Maggie's story, intertwined with scientific advancement, became a beacon of hope, a testament to the idea that it was never too late to reclaim strength and dignity. As the year drew toward its close, Maggie reflected on the journey that had brought her to this new horizon. The initial uncertainty, the painful setbacks, the moments of doubt and despair, all had been chapters in a story that was still unfolding. She had learned that healing was not a destination but a continuous process of growth, adaptation, and self-discovery. One crisp evening, as Maggie walked through the park with Rachel and Hank, the three of them paused beneath a towering oak tree, its leaves shimmering in the fading light. Maggie looked up at the sky, the stars beginning to twinkle against the darkening canvas. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, for the scientific breakthrough that had sparked her physical transformation, for the relationships that had mended and blossomed, and for the inner strength that had carried her through. Turning to her companions, she said softly, "This journey has taught me that no matter how hard the battle, the tides always turn if you keep believing." Hank smiled, Carter tugged at her sleeve, and Rachel squeezed her hand. In that moment, surrounded by love and hope, Maggie knew the turning tides were only the beginning of a new chapter. One filled with endless possibilities and the unwavering power of the human spirit. The gentle hum of the early morning settled over Maggie's apartment like a soft blanket, wrapping around her as she stirred awake. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting warm streaks across the faded photographs on her dresser, snapshots of a life lived, memories frozen in time. Some of those memories brought a smile, others a pang of regret. Maggie knew healing wasn't just about rebuilding muscle or regaining strength, it was about confronting the echoes of the past that shaped who she was and who she hoped to become. That morning, after her therapy session, Maggie found herself drawn to a box tucked away in the closet, a collection of letters and keepsakes from years gone by. As she sifted through the fragile pages, one letter fell open in her hands, written in David's familiar handwriting. The words were a mix of love, hope, and apology, sentiments that echoed the complicated dance of their marriage and eventual separation. Maggie read it slowly, each sentence stirring emotions she had buried deep. It was a reminder of the dreams they had once shared and the wounds they had both carried. The weight of the past pressed against her heart, but instead of retreating, Maggie chose to face it head-on. She called Rachel, asking if she wanted to come over for tea and talk. Their conversations had become a lifeline, a bridge between past hurts and future hope. When Rachel arrived, they sat together in the living room, the afternoon light wrapping around them like a promise. Maggie shared the letter, her voice steady but soft. Rachel listened, tears glistening in her eyes. "It's hard to hold on to pain and love at the same time," Rachel said quietly. "But maybe that's what makes us human." The conversation opened a door to deeper healing, allowing both mother and daughter to acknowledge their shared history, the joys, mistakes, and misunderstandings that had shaped their lives. As days turned into weeks, Maggie continued to confront other echoes from her past. Old friends reached out, some relationships rekindled, others gently closed with grace. She revisited places she hadn't seen in years, a favorite cafe, the old music hall where David once played, the park where she and Rachel had spent so many afternoons. Each visit was a thread weaving the tapestry of her new life, blending past and present into a richer whole. Yet, confronting the past also brought unexpected challenges. Some memories stirred feelings of guilt and regret, moments where Maggie felt the weight of choices and lost opportunities. During therapy, these emotions sometimes surfaced as physical tension, a reminder that healing was as much emotional as it was physical. Emily, her mindfulness coach, guided her through these moments with compassion. "Allow yourself to feel without judgment," Emily advised. "Healing happens when we accept all parts of ourselves, even the painful ones." Maggie embraced this wisdom, learning to sit with discomfort and transform it into strength. One evening, Maggie received a letter that would change everything, a formal invitation to speak at a national conference on senior health and innovation. The organizers wanted her to share her story, the groundbreaking Myosin treatment, and the emotional journey that accompanied her recovery. The invitation both thrilled and terrified her. Speaking in front of an audience was far from comfortable, but the chance to inspire others was a powerful motivator. With support from Rachel and the trial team, Maggie began preparing. She pored over her notes, practiced her speech, and visualized the impact her story could have. The preparation became a journey in itself, an opportunity to reflect on how far she had come and the message she wanted to share. On the day of the conference, Maggie stood backstage, heart pounding but face calm. As she stepped into the spotlight, the audience's expectant faces blurred into a sea of possibility. She spoke with honesty and passion, recounting the physical struggles, the scientific breakthrough, the emotional battles, and the power of community. The response was overwhelming: applause, questions, and heartfelt messages from seniors and caregivers alike. Maggie realized that her story was bigger than herself. It was a beacon of hope for countless others facing their own battles. After the event, a woman approached Maggie with tears in her eyes. "Your story gave me the courage to start my own recovery," she said. "Thank you." The moment crystallized Maggie's purpose and fueled her determination to keep pushing forward. Back home, Maggie and Rachel celebrated with a quiet dinner, their bond stronger than ever. As they toasted to new beginnings, Maggie felt the echoes of the past no longer as burdens but as the foundation of a future built on resilience, love, and hope. The journey was far from over, but the path was clearer, and brighter, than ever before. Maggie sat quietly by the window of her small apartment, watching the rain fall in steady sheets against the glass. The rhythmic tapping was soothing yet reflective of the storm she felt inside. Recovery had brought her to a place of strength and hope, but with that growth came unexpected crossroads. Moments where choices loomed large and the direction forward was uncertain. She thought about the Myosin trial, the incredible progress she'd made, and the people who had become part of her journey: Hank, Lupe, Rachel, Nana Jean. Each relationship was a lifeline, each day a gift. But now, as the trial approached its final phase, Maggie faced decisions that would shape not only her future but also the future of the treatment that had given her new life. One particular choice weighed heavily: whether to commit to a more aggressive physical therapy regimen that promised faster results but carried risks of injury or setback. Her doctors, though cautious, encouraged her to consider the option, citing data from other patients who had benefited. Maggie knew the decision wasn't simply about muscle or strength, it was about trusting her body, listening to her instincts, and balancing hope with realism. She discussed it at length with Dr. Marsh, whose calm demeanor helped untangle her fears. "You've come so far," Marsh said gently. "But this next step is yours to take. We'll support you no matter what." That night, Maggie confided in Rachel, whose insight surprised her. "Mom," Rachel said thoughtfully, "sometimes the bravest thing is to say no. Strength isn't always about pushing harder, it's about knowing your limits and honoring them." Their conversation was a balm to Maggie's restless mind, reminding her that courage came in many forms. Meanwhile, Maggie's community outreach work flourished. Speaking at senior centers and local events, she connected with others facing similar struggles. Their stories of pain, resilience, and hope echoed her own, reinforcing the shared human experience that transcended individual battles. One afternoon, after a talk at a community center, a man approached Maggie with a question that lingered long after their conversation. "How do you keep going when the path feels impossible?" he asked. Maggie paused, considering her own journey filled with setbacks and breakthroughs. "I focus on the small steps," she replied. "Every day, every moment is a chance to move forward, even if it's just a little." Those words became a mantra as Maggie navigated the complex emotions surrounding her crossroads. She explored mindfulness practices with Emily, delved into journaling, and leaned on the support of her friends and family. In the quiet moments between therapy sessions, she reflected on what truly mattered, not just physical strength but emotional resilience and connection. One evening, Nana Jean invited Maggie over for dinner, the aroma of homemade stew filling the air. Over the meal, Jean shared stories from her own life, times when she had faced difficult decisions and found clarity by trusting her heart. "Life will always present crossroads," Jean said. "But your strength lies in how you walk through them." Maggie felt a deep sense of gratitude for Jean's wisdom and presence. As days passed, she made her decision: to continue at her own pace, honoring her body's signals and focusing on sustainable progress rather than speed. The choice was empowering, reaffirming her agency in a process that often felt dictated by clinical protocols. With renewed confidence, Maggie embraced the journey ahead, aware that healing was not a race but a winding path. That autumn, Maggie and Rachel planned a trip to visit David's favorite hiking trail, a place filled with memories and meaning. The walk was slow and deliberate, filled with laughter, shared stories, and moments of silence that spoke volumes. As they reached a clearing overlooking a valley painted in fall colors, Maggie breathed deeply, feeling a profound connection to the past and present. "This is what healing looks like," she said softly. "Not perfection, but peace." Rachel smiled, squeezing her mother's hand. Together, they faced the crossroads of life, not with fear, but with hope and love as their guides. The morning light spilled through the windows of Maggie's apartment, casting long, golden beams that seemed to herald a new beginning. After months of healing, reflection, and difficult decisions, Maggie was ready to embrace what lay beyond the familiar. The Myosin treatment had done more than rebuild her muscles, it had reshaped her outlook on life, opening doors she hadn't dared to knock on before. As she prepared for the day, Maggie felt a surge of excitement and nervous anticipation. Today was the start of a new chapter. She had accepted an invitation to join a research advisory panel focused on developing senior wellness programs that combine science, community support, and emotional health. The opportunity was both an honor and a challenge. It meant stepping out from the role of patient and advocate into a position where her experience could help shape policies and innovations impacting thousands. With Rachel's encouraging smile behind her, Maggie took a deep breath and stepped out the door, ready to meet the future head-on. At the panel's first meeting, Maggie was struck by the diversity of voices: scientists, healthcare professionals, senior citizens, and caregivers, all united by a shared mission. The discussions were rich and sometimes intense, grappling with complex issues of aging, mobility, and dignity. Maggie found herself contributing stories from her own journey, reminding everyone that behind data and statistics were real lives shaped by courage and hope. One afternoon, during a break in the meeting, Maggie struck up a conversation with Dr. Alan Green, a leading researcher in muscle regeneration. He spoke passionately about emerging treatments and the importance of patient perspectives. "Your insights are invaluable," Alan said. "Science advances fastest when it listens to those it aims to serve." The connection sparked new inspiration in Maggie, motivating her to deepen her involvement and continue advocating for holistic approaches to senior health. Outside the panel, Maggie's daily routine had transformed. She no longer viewed therapy as a burden but as a celebration of what her body could achieve. Each step was a testament to perseverance and the power of innovative science like Myosin. Her walks in the park grew longer, often accompanied by Rachel or Hank, their conversations blending laughter with reflections on the journey. One weekend, Maggie and Rachel attended a community festival celebrating aging and vitality. The event was filled with music, workshops, and stories of transformation. Maggie shared her story on a small stage, the crowd's warm applause reinforcing the deep connection between personal narrative and collective healing. Later, she joined a dance class for seniors, a vibrant mix of movement and joy that reminded her of the music-filled days of her youth. The experience was liberating, a joyful reclaiming of body and spirit. Yet, new horizons also brought fresh challenges. Maggie grappled with moments of doubt, wondering if she could truly sustain this new pace of life. There were days when fatigue returned, when old aches whispered reminders of vulnerability. But she met these moments with the wisdom earned from her journey: acceptance, patience, and the willingness to ask for help. Nana Jean remained a steadfast presence, offering guidance that transcended words. "The horizon always shifts," Jean said one afternoon as they sat on the porch swing. "Our task is to keep walking, eyes open, heart steady." Inspired by Jean's words, Maggie took up journaling to capture her evolving thoughts and dreams. Writing became a mirror reflecting her growth and a compass pointing toward the future. The pages held everything, from gratitude to fears, from victories to quiet moments of reflection. As the seasons turned from autumn to winter, Maggie found herself dreaming bigger. She envisioned creating a foundation dedicated to research, education, and support for seniors navigating muscle loss and aging with dignity. It was a vision rooted in her own experience and fueled by a desire to give back. One crisp evening, Maggie shared her dream with Rachel and Hank over a cozy dinner. Their enthusiastic support filled her with renewed energy. "This foundation could change lives," Rachel said. You've already changed mine. The idea sparked a whirlwind of planning, meetings, and networking. Maggie balanced her therapy and community work with the demanding but rewarding task of building something new. Throughout it all, she remained grounded in the lessons learned along the way, the power of hope, the importance of connection, and the unyielding strength of the human spirit. As Maggie stood one evening on her balcony, gazing at the city lights twinkling like stars, she felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been long and winding, marked by pain and triumph, loss and rediscovery. But now, the horizon was wide open, a landscape of endless possibility waiting to be explored. With a deep breath, she whispered to the night, "Here's to new beginnings." Even as Maggie's body grew stronger and her confidence blossomed, she discovered that some of the most difficult battles were the ones no one could see. The physical recovery, though grueling, was tangible, muscle fibers regenerating, strength returning inch by inch. But beneath the surface, unseen struggles emerged in the form of anxiety, self-doubt, and the lingering shadows of isolation. It began subtly. In moments of quiet, Maggie found her mind racing with worries about the future, about the permanence of her progress, about the judgments others might hold. The vibrant optimism that had fueled her early recovery occasionally dimmed under the weight of these invisible fears. She noticed that even in crowds, at the community events, the panel meetings, there were times she felt alone, disconnected by the invisible walls of uncertainty. These unseen battles tested her resolve in ways she hadn't anticipated. During therapy sessions, physical pain sometimes intertwined with emotional tension. A missed step or a moment of dizziness was no longer just a setback for her muscles but a trigger for spiraling doubts about her capabilities. At night, restless thoughts kept her awake, the silence amplifying the fears she struggled to voice. Rachel became a vital anchor during these times. One evening, after Maggie confessed her worries over a cup of chamomile tea, Rachel reached across the table, her eyes steady and kind. "Mom, it's okay to feel scared. Healing isn't just about fixing the body, it's about learning to live with the parts of us that are fragile." Her words offered a balm, reminding Maggie that vulnerability was not weakness but a facet of strength. To confront these battles, Maggie sought support beyond the clinical team. She began attending a support group for seniors navigating chronic health challenges. The group was a mosaic of stories, some hopeful, some painful, all real. Listening to others share their hidden fears and triumphs helped Maggie feel less alone in her experience. She, too, found courage in opening up, sharing moments when she felt overwhelmed or afraid. The connection fostered a new layer of healing, emotional and communal. Meanwhile, Dr. Marsh introduced Maggie to a psychologist specializing in chronic illness and aging. Through counseling, Maggie learned tools to manage anxiety, practicing mindfulness techniques that helped ground her during turbulent moments. Breathing exercises, visualization, and gentle affirmations became part of her daily routine, weaving calm into the fabric of her life. Yet, the unseen battles were not without setbacks. There were days when Maggie felt trapped in a cycle of fear and frustration, doubting if she could ever fully reclaim her life. In one particularly difficult moment, she nearly withdrew from the upcoming public speaking event, fearing her vulnerability would be exposed. But encouragement from Rachel and the support group reminded her that authenticity could inspire others. Standing on that stage, sharing both her successes and struggles, Maggie found a new kind of strength, the power of honesty to heal and connect. As winter deepened, Maggie discovered that these unseen battles were part of a larger journey toward wholeness. Healing was not linear but layered, requiring patience, compassion, and the courage to face the shadows as well as the light. She grew to understand that progress included moments of doubt and fear, and that these moments did not diminish her achievements but enriched them. Nana Jean's wisdom continued to guide her. One afternoon, as they sat knitting by the fire, Jean said, "The strongest trees weather the fiercest storms because their roots run deep. Your unseen battles are the roots that keep you grounded." Those words resonated deeply, helping Maggie embrace the full complexity of her journey. In this chapter of her life, Maggie learned that strength was multifaceted, a combination of physical resilience, emotional honesty, and the willingness to seek help. She vowed to carry this understanding forward, using it not only for herself but as a message to others who might be fighting their own unseen battles. With this new awareness, Maggie stepped into the coming days with a quieter confidence. The storms within still came, but she no longer faced them alone or unarmed. The tides had turned not just on her muscles but within her soul, revealing depths of courage she had yet to fully explore. The fragile threads of Maggie's past relationships began to weave back into a tapestry stronger than before, as she slowly rebuilt bridges that once seemed broken beyond repair. Her recovery was not just physical or emotional, it was relational, touching every corner of her life where distance, misunderstanding, or hurt had taken root. One of the first bridges was with her estranged brother, Daniel, whose absence had long been a source of quiet pain. Years of silence and resentment had built walls too high for simple apologies, yet Maggie's determination to heal extended beyond herself. After a tentative phone call, Daniel agreed to meet. They chose a small cafe halfway between their homes, the kind of place they used to frequent as kids. When they saw each other, the awkwardness was palpable, but beneath it lay a shared longing for connection. Over steaming coffee and hesitant conversation, years of hurt began to unravel. Maggie listened as Daniel spoke of his struggles and regrets, and she shared her own journey with honesty and openness. It wasn't an instant fix but a first step toward forgiveness and understanding. The meeting sparked a new chapter in their relationship, one built on patience, empathy, and the shared memories that time could never erase. Around the same time, Maggie reached out to old friends she had lost touch with during the years she battled her health. Reconnecting was both joyful and bittersweet. Some friendships rekindled quickly, filled with laughter and support, others faded gently, acknowledging that people change and grow apart. Each interaction taught Maggie more about the ebb and flow of human connection and the importance of nurturing the relationships that mattered most. At home, Maggie and Rachel deepened their bond. Their shared experiences, the pain, the healing, the triumphs, created a new foundation of trust and love. Rachel's unwavering support became a beacon during difficult days, and Maggie's renewed strength inspired Rachel in return. They began traditions old and new, Sunday morning coffee runs, movie nights with Nana Jean, and weekend hikes that celebrated every step Maggie could take. Yet, rebuilding bridges wasn't always easy. There were moments when past wounds surfaced, when misunderstandings threatened to undo progress. Maggie learned to navigate these with grace, using open communication and sometimes professional help to repair the damage. Therapy sessions with Dr. Marsh and counseling with the psychologist provided tools to manage conflict and foster empathy. One poignant moment came when Maggie invited David's sister, Linda, to visit. Their relationship had been strained after the divorce, complicated by grief and unresolved feelings. Over a quiet dinner, they shared memories of David, laughter, and tears mingling as old hurts softened. The visit marked a turning point, allowing both women to support each other in ways they hadn't before. Through these efforts, Maggie discovered that rebuilding bridges was an act of courage and humility. It required vulnerability and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. But it also brought healing that was deeper than any physical therapy, a restoration of belonging and love. This process echoed the lessons Maggie had learned about her own body. Healing wasn't just about fixing what was broken but about growing stronger in new ways. As spring arrived, Maggie organized a reunion picnic at the local park, inviting friends, family, and neighbors who had played a part in her journey. The gathering was filled with warmth, stories, and shared celebration. Children ran through the grass while adults talked, laughed, and remembered. For Maggie, the picnic was a tangible symbol of the bridges rebuilt, connections restored and new ones formed, weaving a community bound by resilience and hope. Standing among the crowd, Maggie felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey had not been hers alone, it was a collective story of compassion, forgiveness, and love. She thought back to the moments when she had felt most isolated and knew that the bridges she had rebuilt had carried her to a place where loneliness no longer defined her. As the sun set behind the trees, casting a golden glow over the scene, Maggie held Rachel's hand and smiled. "We're stronger together," she said softly. Rachel nodded, her eyes shining. "Always." With these words, Maggie embraced the future, not as a solitary path but as a shared adventure, built on the bridges they had dared to rebuild. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it, and for Maggie, one such surprise came in the form of an unexpected gift that challenged her notions of success, worth, and the meaning of healing. It happened on an ordinary afternoon as she was leaving a local grocery store, the kind of routine moment that often goes unnoticed but sometimes holds the seeds of transformation. As Maggie carried her bags to the car, an elderly man approached her, his eyes warm but tired. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said softly, "I just wanted to thank you." Puzzled, Maggie looked up. The man smiled gently. "Your talks at the community center, they've changed my life." For a brief moment, Maggie was speechless. She had never imagined that her story, her struggles and triumphs, could ripple out to touch strangers in such a profound way. The man introduced himself as Mr. Thompson, a retired teacher who had struggled with muscle loss and isolation since his wife's passing. Over the next few minutes, he shared how hearing Maggie's journey gave him hope to reconnect with his own community, to try the myosin treatment his doctor had recently recommended. The encounter was a small but powerful reminder that healing was never just personal, it was communal, a gift passed along in ways we might never fully see. That evening, Maggie reflected on the interaction with a mix of humility and gratitude. She realized that beyond the scientific breakthroughs and physical progress, her greatest impact might be in the simple act of sharing her truth. It was a lesson that extended to her foundation plans, reminding her that stories, connection, and empathy were just as vital as research funding. Meanwhile, the myosin trial entered a crucial phase as new data came in. That evening, Maggie reflected on the interaction with a mix of humility and gratitude. She realized that beyond the scientific breakthroughs and physical progress, her greatest impact might be in the simple act of sharing her truth. It was a lesson that extended to her foundation plans, reminding her that stories, connection, and empathy were just as vital as research funding. Meanwhile, the myosin trial entered a crucial phase as new data came in. The treatment continued to show promising results, but with that came complex questions about accessibility and equity. Maggie found herself advocating not only for the science but also for policies ensuring that treatments like myosin could reach underserved communities. She engaged with policymakers, attended forums, and spoke passionately about the importance of health equity. This new role stretched her in unexpected ways, blending advocacy with leadership. Amid these expanding horizons, Maggie's personal life continued to evolve. Rachel, inspired by her mother's journey, decided to pursue a career in physical therapy, hoping to help others the way Maggie had been helped. Their shared mission brought them even closer, a source of pride and motivation for both. Hank, too, found new meaning in his work, focusing on community outreach and senior health education. The trio's intertwined paths reflected the ripple effect of Maggie's healing, the unexpected gifts that grew from hardship. One day, while sorting through old photos, Maggie found a letter David had written years ago but never sent. It spoke of dreams for their family, hopes for the future, and a wish that they would always find strength in each other. Reading the letter brought a fresh wave of emotion, a mixture of sorrow and comfort. It reminded Maggie that healing included holding on to memories, honoring the past while moving forward. As spring turned to summer, Maggie organized a special event at the community center called The Gift of Healing, bringing together patients, doctors, caregivers, and neighbors. The day was filled with stories, workshops, and celebrations of resilience. Mr. Thompson was among the attendees, his presence a testament to the power of connection and the unexpected ways healing unfolds. The event was a milestone for Maggie and her foundation, a gathering that celebrated not only progress but also the humanity at its core. In quiet moments after the event, Maggie often thought back to that chance encounter in the grocery store parking lot. It encapsulated everything she had learned, that healing is a gift given and received, a cycle that transforms both the giver and the receiver. It was a gift she intended to keep sharing, one story, one connection at a time. Maggie often thought about what it truly meant to have power, especially after everything she'd been through. It wasn't about controlling others or wielding authority but something far deeper, a quiet strength that comes from knowing yourself and choosing hope every day. This power within had become her anchor through the toughest storms and the brightest days. One morning, as sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, Maggie stood in front of the mirror, noticing how her reflection had changed over the months. The lines on her face told stories of struggle and resilience, of nights filled with doubt but also mornings filled with determination. She no longer saw a woman defined by limitations but one shaped by courage and growth. The myosin treatment had helped rebuild her muscles, but the true transformation was internal, the ability to face life's uncertainties with grace. At the community center, Maggie started a new program focused on mindfulness and empowerment for seniors. She wanted to share the tools she'd learned in therapy and counseling, breathing techniques, meditation, and exercises in self-compassion. The sessions were intimate and raw, with participants sharing stories of pain, loss, and hope. Maggie listened carefully, encouraging each person to find their own power within. One participant, Mrs. Jenkins, a widow struggling with depression, said during a session, "I never thought I could feel strong again. But here, I'm learning that strength isn't about what I can do, but who I am." Maggie smiled, recognizing her own journey reflected in these words. The program grew, attracting more seniors who sought not just physical healing but emotional renewal. Maggie's role evolved from patient and advocate to guide and mentor, helping others tap into their hidden reservoirs of strength. Meanwhile, challenges persisted. There were moments when Maggie's progress stalled or when the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. Balancing her foundation work, personal life, and health required constant adjustments. But each challenge was met with the resilience that had become second nature. She reminded herself, and those around her, that setbacks were not failures but part of the journey toward lasting change. One particularly memorable moment came during a citywide health fair, where Maggie was invited to speak about empowerment. Standing before a large audience, she shared her story, not just the physical recovery but the emotional battles and the discovery of inner strength. Her words resonated deeply, eliciting tears and applause. After the speech, a young woman approached Maggie with tears in her eyes. "You gave me hope when I felt lost," she said. "Thank you for showing me the power within." The encounter reaffirmed Maggie's belief in the transformative power of vulnerability and connection. Back at home, Maggie's relationship with Rachel continued to flourish. Rachel's studies in physical therapy progressed, fueled by the inspiration her mother provided. Their conversations often centered on healing, not just of the body but of the spirit. Hank remained a steady presence, supporting their shared vision and offering practical help when needed. Together, they formed a circle of strength that lifted each other up. As summer deepened, Maggie took time to reflect on the lessons learned. She journaled about the power within, the ability to choose hope over despair, to find meaning in struggle, and to embrace vulnerability as a source of strength. These reflections became the foundation for a book she began writing, hoping to reach a wider audience with her message. Nana Jean's words echoed in her mind. "The power within is a flame that never goes out, even when the world feels dark." This flame was now fully ignited within Maggie. She knew the journey wasn't over, healing was an ongoing process, a daily choice. But armed with this power, she faced the future with open arms and an open heart. Maggie stood at a crossroads, both literally and figuratively, as she faced one of the most pivotal decisions of her life. The steady progress she'd made physically and emotionally had opened doors she never expected to see again. But with new opportunities came difficult choices that challenged everything she thought she knew about herself and her future. The crossroads appeared when Maggie received two life-changing offers within days of each other. One was an invitation to join a National Health Advisory Panel, a prestigious role that would allow her to influence policies affecting seniors across the country. The other was a chance to lead a new research initiative, partnering with top scientists to develop next-generation treatments for muscle loss. Both opportunities were incredible but demanded different commitments. The advisory panel required extensive travel, public speaking, and a role in shaping legislation. The research initiative promised hands-on involvement in cutting-edge science but would mean long hours in labs and less time with her family. Maggie weighed the options carefully. Joining the advisory panel aligned with her passion for advocacy and giving voice to seniors often overlooked. But it also meant stepping further into the public eye, exposing herself to scrutiny and pressure. Leading the research initiative tapped into her curiosity and desire to be part of a scientific breakthrough but risked isolating her from the community and loved ones who grounded her. Conversations with Rachel and Hank were filled with honest discussions about what each path would entail. Rachel, excited by the possibilities, encouraged Maggie to follow her heart but reminded her to consider balance and self-care. Hank, pragmatic and supportive, emphasized that whatever Maggie chose, it should reflect her deepest values and long-term happiness. During this time, Maggie also grappled with internal doubts and fears. Could she handle the demands of such high-profile roles? Was she ready to face potential criticism or failure? What would it mean for the quiet life she had rebuilt with Rachel and Hank? These questions stirred moments of anxiety but also fueled deeper self-reflection. To gain clarity, Maggie returned to her journal, writing down fears, hopes, and the core principles guiding her journey. She revisited the lessons learned from her recovery, the importance of resilience, the power within, and the value of connection. She asked herself what legacy she wanted to leave, not just professionally but personally. In search of perspective, Maggie sought advice from mentors and friends, including Dr. Marsh and Nana Jean. Dr. Marsh encouraged her to view the decision not as a final destination but as a step in an evolving journey. Nana Jean, with her characteristic wisdom, reminded Maggie that life's crossroads were opportunities to honor both the past and the future. "Listen to your heart, child," Jean said, "but don't forget to listen to your soul." After days of contemplation, Maggie made her choice. She accepted the role on the National Health Advisory Panel, believing that her voice could help shape policies that would benefit millions. She recognized that her visibility might increase, but so would her impact. The decision felt right, not because it was easy but because it aligned with her purpose. As Maggie prepared to step into this new chapter, she experienced a mix of excitement and apprehension. The road ahead promised challenges, but also the chance to bring hope and change to others. She knew that the strength she'd cultivated through every trial would sustain her. At a small gathering with Rachel, Hank, and close friends, Maggie shared her decision. They celebrated not only the opportunity but the courage it represented. Rachel hugged her tightly, whispering, "You've always been my hero." Hank smiled proudly, ready to support her every step. Standing at this crossroads, Maggie felt a profound sense of gratitude, for the journey that brought her here, for the people who walked beside her, and for the power within that would guide her forward. The future was uncertain, but she embraced it with open arms, ready to write the next chapter of her story. Stepping into the spotlight was a new experience for Maggie, one that brought both exhilaration and an unfamiliar weight. Her appointment to the National Health Advisory Panel thrust her into arenas she had never navigated before. Policy meetings, media interviews, public forums where the stakes were high and the audience critical. Despite the nerves, Maggie embraced the role with determination, drawing on every lesson learned during her recovery and advocacy. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of introductions, briefings, and strategy sessions. Maggie was surrounded by experts, doctors, policymakers, researchers, each passionate about improving senior health but often speaking in jargon that felt overwhelming at times. She quickly realized that her strength was not just in understanding the science but in translating it into human stories that resonated. At a televised panel discussion, Maggie shared her own journey, weaving together the science behind muscle loss with the emotional realities faced by seniors like herself. Her authenticity struck a chord, drawing attention beyond the usual policy circles. The media began to follow her work, curious about the woman who was both a survivor and a voice for change. With increased visibility came new pressures. Maggie learned to navigate interviews, manage public expectations, and handle criticism, some constructive, some harsh. There were moments when the scrutiny felt intense, stirring doubts she hadn't faced in years. But Maggie leaned on her support system. Rachel, now a skilled physical therapy student, offered grounding and perspective. Hank reminded her to prioritize balance and self-care. Nana Jean's steady wisdom was a sanctuary amid the noise. The advisory panel tackled complex issues, access to treatments like Myosin, funding for senior health research, and policies to address healthcare disparities. Maggie's contributions were valued, particularly her insistence on including patient voices in decision-making. She pushed for initiatives that recognized the whole person, not just the medical condition. One breakthrough came when Maggie helped secure federal funding to expand Myosin accessibility for low-income seniors. It was a victory not just for the science but for communities that had been overlooked too long. As Maggie's influence grew, so did her commitment to mentorship. She began speaking at schools and community centers, inspiring younger generations to pursue careers in healthcare and advocacy. Her story became a beacon of hope, showing that even when life seemed to close doors, new ones could open. Despite the demanding schedule, Maggie carved out moments for reflection and joy. Weekend hikes with Rachel and quiet evenings with Hank became essential rituals, reminders of the life she was fighting to protect. Maggie also found time to continue writing her book, capturing the journey from vulnerability to empowerment. The process was cathartic, allowing her to process experiences and share insights with a wider audience. One evening, after a particularly challenging day, Maggie received a letter from a woman in a small town who had read about her in a newspaper. The woman described how Maggie's story gave her courage to seek treatment and reconnect with her family after years of isolation. The letter was a powerful affirmation of Maggie's impact, a reminder that stepping into the spotlight was not about fame but about making a difference. As the chapter of public service unfolded, Maggie realized that the spotlight was not just on her but on an entire community of seniors whose stories deserved to be heard. Her role was to amplify those voices, to fight for dignity, care, and hope. The journey was far from over, but Maggie faced it with the quiet confidence of someone who had rebuilt not just muscle but the very essence of strength. As Maggie stood at the edge of a new chapter, reflecting on the long journey behind her, one truth became clearer than ever: love leads the way. It was love, whether for family, friends, or the broader community, that had carried her through every struggle, every moment of doubt, every step toward healing. This final chapter of her story wasn't about endings but about the profound lessons she had learned about sacrifice, connection, and the unbreakable bonds that define us. The journey began with Maggie's early days of loss and physical decline, moments when hope seemed distant and the future uncertain. But even then, love had been present, quiet and steady: Rachel's unwavering support, Hank's steadfast encouragement, Nana Jean's gentle wisdom. These relationships were the roots grounding Maggie through storms, giving her the strength to rebuild muscle and spirit alike. Over the years, Maggie had come to see love not as a fleeting emotion but as a deliberate choice and a guiding force. It was in the small acts, checking in on a friend, sharing a meal, holding a hand during hard times, that love found its most powerful expression. This understanding shaped how she approached her work on the health advisory panel and in the community. Maggie advocated fiercely not just for medical advancements but for compassionate care that honored the whole person. She knew that true healing extended beyond treatments and protocols; it flourished in environments where people felt valued and loved. One of the most poignant moments came during a ceremony honoring Maggie's advocacy work. Surrounded by colleagues, patients, and family, she was presented with an award recognizing her contributions to senior health and well-being. In her acceptance speech, Maggie spoke not of personal achievements but of the collective journey. "This is not my story alone," she said, her voice steady with emotion. "It's the story of every person who has faced hardship with courage, every family that has held tight through uncertain times, every community that has lifted one another up. Love is what leads the way." After the ceremony, Maggie spent quiet moments with Rachel and Hank, their smiles reflecting the shared pride and joy that words could not fully capture. Together, they celebrated the journey, its challenges and triumphs, and the future filled with promise. At home, Maggie continued to nurture the relationships that mattered most. Rachel's career in physical therapy blossomed, inspired by her mother's example. Hank's commitment to community health grew alongside Maggie's work, their partnership a foundation of mutual respect and care. Even Nana Jean, whose presence was a constant source of grounding, remained a vital thread in their family tapestry. The book Maggie had been writing was completed and published, receiving heartfelt responses from readers across the country. Letters poured in, sharing stories of healing, hope, and renewed purpose. Maggie realized that her journey had sparked a ripple effect far beyond what she had imagined. Looking back, Maggie saw how every twist and turn, every setback and breakthrough, had shaped her into the woman she was today. She had learned that strength was not the absence of struggle but the courage to face it with love and grace. The final lesson was perhaps the most profound: life is full of surprises, but love will always lead the way. As she sat on the porch one warm evening, the sky painted with hues of pink and gold, Maggie felt a deep sense of peace. The future was still uncertain, but she knew she was ready. Surrounded by the people who mattered most, guided by the lessons learned, Maggie embraced the journey ahead with an open heart. In that moment, love was not just a word but a living force, an unbreakable light illuminating the path forward. And with that light, Maggie's story continued, a testament to the enduring power of love, family, and hope. After completing a journey full of emotions and significant turning points, Maggie realized that life never stops at an ending. Every conclusion opens the door to a new beginning, and her journey was no exception. Although she had achieved great success in restoring her health, positively impacting the community, and becoming a symbol of hope, Maggie still felt a powerful desire for continuous growth, endless learning, and spreading love. One early morning, as gentle sunlight filtered through the window, Maggie sat at her desk with a pen in hand, preparing for a new project. A nationwide program to support the physical and mental health of seniors, especially those living in rural areas and places with limited access to medical services. She knew that while Myosin had opened a new horizon for muscle recovery, many social and psychological challenges remained for the elderly. Maggie began planning a program that combined medical technology with mental health counseling sessions, gentle exercise classes, and a community support network, helping seniors not only improve physically but also feel cared for and less isolated. During the preparation, Maggie received enthusiastic support from Rachel, who not only accompanied her but also helped develop professional exercise routines and rehabilitation plans. Hank, with his extensive experience in community education, also joined in connecting local organizations to ensure the program's effective outreach. The project attracted attention from numerous nonprofits, healthcare agencies, and local governments. Maggie spent much time conducting field visits, meeting each program participant, hearing their stories, the difficulties and small joys of daily life. These stories continued to inspire her, reminding her that every effort had meaning and could change the life of one person, one family, one community. One day, at a meeting with doctors, researchers, and social activists, Maggie was invited to speak about the importance of combining science and humanity in elderly care. She shared, "Our bodies can recover, but our spirits also need nurturing. We cannot focus solely on medicine while forgetting human connections. It is love and caring for one another that create sustainability for holistic health." Those words not only inspired but also became the guiding principle for Maggie's project. She continuously learned from participants and international colleagues at conferences, updating new technologies and improving the program to best suit each community. Additionally, Maggie spent time continuing to write her book. This part focused on sharing real stories and comprehensive support methods to spread knowledge and understanding more widely. Family life was also a cherished priority for Maggie. She and Rachel, alongside career plans, always kept simple moments together, shared dinners, weekend outings, or late-night conversations. Hank remained the steady partner, always a reliable foundation when Maggie needed him. That love and connection were an endless source of energy for Maggie to keep moving forward. One autumn afternoon, when golden leaves covered the small path in front of the house, Maggie received an unexpected call from an international organization seeking experienced experts to collaborate on a global elderly care project. This was a rare opportunity for Maggie to expand her influence worldwide, while also learning and contributing to new developments in the field she was passionate about. After many nights of thought and consulting loved ones, Maggie decided to accept the invitation. She knew that although challenges lay ahead, this was the next step in her ongoing journey of growth and the mission she pursued. Before leaving, Maggie organized an intimate gathering with family, friends, and community colleagues. Everyone expressed blessings and confidence in her abilities. Maggie clearly felt the power of love and unconditional support fueling her to overcome any limits. On the first flight, Maggie looked out the window, watching fluffy white clouds and feeling a deep connection to the vast world outside. She understood that the journey was not only about herself but about people, stories, and hearts waiting for positive change. Wherever she was, she would carry the flame of love, inner strength, and the belief that love would always lead the way. Life continued, constantly expanding with new opportunities, new challenges, and untold stories. Maggie was ready to step forward with deep gratitude and unwavering resilience. Years had passed since Maggie first discovered the life-changing power of that one ingredient, myosin, and since then, her life had transformed in ways she never imagined. As she looked back on her journey, from fragile beginnings through trials, hope, and triumph, she realized the true legacy she wanted to leave was not just about muscle rebuilding but about inspiring strength in every sense of the word. The strength to face adversity, to love deeply, and to foster change. Her international work had flourished beyond her expectations. Maggie had become a beacon for seniors worldwide, a symbol of resilience and compassion. But more than titles and recognition, what mattered most to her was the lives she touched. In small villages where access to healthcare was limited, Maggie's programs had rekindled hope. Elders who once felt forgotten now stood taller, walked farther, and reconnected with their families and communities. Maggie often received letters and messages from participants, filled with gratitude and stories of renewed purpose. These messages fueled her passion daily. At home, Maggie had embraced a new role, that of a mentor and teacher. She worked closely with young healthcare professionals, sharing her unique blend of scientific knowledge and human experience. She encouraged them to remember that healing was more than medicine, it was connection and understanding. In a lecture hall filled with eager students, Maggie once said, "Healing happens in the space where science meets the heart." Never forget the people behind the data. Her own family remained her greatest source of joy. Rachel, now a leader in physical therapy research, often credited her mother's journey as the spark that ignited her passion. Hank continued to support and challenge Maggie, their partnership growing richer with each year. Together, they built a community center dedicated to senior wellness. Offering classes, counseling, social events, and most importantly, a space where no one felt alone. The center was a living testament to Maggie's belief that love and care created the foundation for true health. Maggie also saw her book become a beloved resource, translated into multiple languages, touching lives far beyond her hometown. Its pages told not only her story but those of countless others who had faced their own mountains and found ways to climb. One crisp morning, as Maggie walked through the garden she and Hank had planted, she paused to reflect. The flowers bloomed brightly, a symbol of growth and renewal. Maggie understood that life's challenges were inevitable, but the legacy she hoped to leave was one of enduring strength and hope. In conversations with young advocates, Maggie emphasized the importance of humility and listening. She believed the future of senior care depended on empathy as much as innovation. Maggie's story had started with a single ingredient but had grown into a movement, a call to remember that every person, regardless of age, deserved dignity, respect, and the chance to thrive. As the sun set behind the hills, casting golden light over the community center bustling with activity, Maggie felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her journey was far from over, but the foundation was solid. Strength, she knew, was built not just in muscles but in hearts and minds, and that legacy would endure long after her voice quieted. The story she shared was a testament to the power of love, perseverance, and the human spirit's unyielding will to rise. And in that, Maggie found peace. Knowing she had helped pave the way for generations to come, lighting the path with hope, courage, and the strength that comes from love. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?